All right, get ready for a deep dive, folks, because this one is juicy.
Oh, yeah. This one's a doozy.
We've got news articles, YouTube transcripts, even a Reddit response, all about the Asmongold controversy.
Yeah, Asmongold, or Zach Hoyt, as he's known IRL, and all the stuff that happened after his comments on the Israel-Palestine conflict.
It's wild how this story jumps between platforms, you know?
It really shows you how something that happens, like in this case, Asmongold's comments, can blow up so differently depending on where it is, you know? Each platform's got its own little world and rules and all that.
Totally, totally. But before we go into what Twitch did and like the whole apology thing, we should probably start with what Asmongold even said in the first place. Right?
Yeah, the stuff that got him in trouble.
Exactly. We actually have a transcript here from his YouTube stream.
And, you know, it wasn't just that he was talking about this super sensitive topic, but the way he talked about it.
The actual language.
Like throwing around phrases like inferior culture and genocide.
Yeah, those aren't exactly casual terms. Yeah.
Especially in this context. It's heavy stuff.
To give everyone an idea of like how strong his language was, here's a quote straight from the transcript. "I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people."
Oof. Yeah, see, that's where it gets complicated.
Definitely.
You got to think about the historical weight of a word like genocide. You know, it's not just like a synonym for bad stuff happening.
Yeah.
This word, it has a very specific legal definition rooted in horrific events like, you know, the Holocaust.
Right, right.
And when you use a word like that casually, it kind of minimizes the suffering of so many people and ignores like how complex this conflict really is.
Yeah, and it's not like this is some private conversation. He has a massive audience, millions of viewers who could be influenced by this kind of talk.
For sure, for sure.
So then the question becomes, what did Twitch, the platform he streams on, actually do about it? Luckily, we have a Game Rant article that breaks down the whole ban situation.
And this article is super helpful because it lays out Twitch's rules, their terms of service, you know, and specifically what they say about hate speech.
Okay, so we can see why they took action.
Exactly. It helps us understand their side of the story.
Now, get this. He wasn't even banned on his main account. It was his alternate account, Zach Rar, that got hit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but the article points out that he actually streams more on that alternate account than his main one.
Interesting. So the ban still, like, mattered.
Oh, yeah, it definitely mattered. Seems like Twitch was being strategic, don't you think?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
They hit him where it hurts, you know, the account he actually uses. But maybe leaving the main one alone takes a little bit of the heat off of everyone.
It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
They got to enforce the rules, but also, you know, it's Asmongold. He's a big name on Twitch.
Exactly. So Twitch took action, but what about Asmongold himself? What was his response to the ban and all the backlash?
Well, first he released a statement on X, which used to be Twitter, right?
Right.
But the article mentions that this first apology, it didn't really land the way he probably hoped.
So what went wrong?
A lot of people felt like he was kind of sidestepping the real issue, you know, like he wasn't owning up to the weight of his words and it came off as insincere.
The classic internet is not impressed situation.
Pretty much. So everyone was like, okay, that's not good enough. We need a real apology.
So did he deliver?
Well, he eventually did. We've got a transcript here of his longer YouTube apology video.
Okay, let's hear about this one.
And the tone in this one, it's definitely different. Like, you can hear it in his voice.
Interesting.
Here, he actually admits that he was being mean-spirited and callous. He talks about how streaming just took over his whole life and he lost sight of the impact of his words.
Wow, so he's acknowledging that there was a problem.
He even says that he was becoming a one-dimensional person. Like, he's starting to recognize how being online 24/7 can mess with your perspective.
Yeah, getting sucked into that online world, it's easy to lose sight of things.
Exactly. And at one point, he straight up says, looking back on it, it's just disgusting. Like, damn, that's some harsh self-critique.
That's intense. It's definitely a very different vibe from his first response.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, and remember, we also have that Reddit post.
Right, from his subreddit.
Where he responds to fans who were, well, let's just say they weren't totally buying his apology video. Even after that YouTube apology, it seemed like people still wanted to hold him accountable.
Yeah, it shows how things work between content creators and their audience, especially on Twitch. It's not just a one-way street.
Yeah, the viewers have a voice too.
Totally. They have expectations, and they're not afraid to call out their favorite streamers when they feel like lines have been crossed.
Okay, so we've got Asmongold dealing with consequences from Twitch, from his community, and it sounds like he's doing some serious soul-searching because of it. He's even talking about making some big changes going forward.
He is. It's kind of a turning point, maybe. We'll have to see.
It really is. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore whether these changes he's talking about are just for show or if they actually point to something deeper. Like a real shift in how he approaches his platform and his responsibility to his audience. Stick with us. So we're back talking about the Asmongold thing, and I gotta say, this whole situation has really got me thinking. It's not just about a Twitch ban or a couple of apologies. I don't know, it's about the pressure of being online all the time, the responsibility that comes with having so many people listening to you.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? And it makes you wonder, can people really change once they've, built their whole identity around a certain online persona?
That's the big question, right?
It is, and it's something we all deal with to some extent these days, right? Everyone's online all the time, so are we all just stuck in these online versions of ourselves?
Totally. And remember how Asmongold talked about getting stuck in that echo chamber online? Losing perspective. That got me thinking, does that happen to everyone who spends a lot of time online?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're bombarded with information constantly, opinions, curated feeds. It's easy to feel like you're getting the full picture, when really you're only seeing a tiny slice of what's actually out there.
So it's not just that we're choosing to see a limited perspective. It's that the technology itself is shaping what we see and don't see. Very creepy when you think about it.
It is kind of creepy. Psychologists and sociologists actually study this phenomenon. They call it filter bubbles or echo chambers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it all comes down to these algorithms that run our social media, search engines, news apps. They personalize everything based on what we've clicked on before, who we follow, all that. So the more we interact with certain types of content, the more of that we see.
It's like being trapped in a feedback loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can seriously warp your perception of the world, especially when it comes to complex issues like, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Right, because if you're only ever exposed to information that confirms your existing beliefs, it's easy to just dismiss any other viewpoints or oversimplify things that are actually really nuanced.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that whole question of responsibility,
Right, because if you've got millions of followers who are basically hanging on your every word.
It's like you become this tastemaker, not just for games or whatever your content is, but for opinions, worldviews,
Yeah.
It's a lot of power.
It is. And then where do you draw the line? We want these online personalities to be authentic, to be themselves.
Right. But that doesn't mean they get a free pass to say whatever they want,
Yeah.
Authenticity doesn't excuse spreading harmful stuff or misinformation.
So then what happens when someone crosses that line? Asmongold got a temporary ban from Twitch, and he stepped down from some leadership positions. But is that enough?
It's tough to say, There isn't a simple answer. It depends on the platform's rules, the individual's choices, and what the community thinks. In this case, Twitch followed its own policies. They took action against the hate speech. And Asmongold made the choice to step down from those organizations where his actions, could have reflected poorly on them.
So both the platform and the individual have a role to play. But ultimately, doesn't it come down to the audience? They're the ones who decide if they accept the apology, if they believe the changes are real, and if they want to keep supporting that person.
Definitely. And we saw that play out in real time, right? Remember that Reddit post where Asmongold was responding to the backlash against his apology video? It shows how accountability isn't just a one-time thing. It's a constant conversation, a back and forth.
So real accountability isn't just about apologies or temporary punishments. It's about showing a commitment to change, to actually learning from your mistakes.
It is. It's about recognizing that your words matter, they have power, and you have a responsibility to use that power carefully. Being open to admitting you were wrong, being willing to challenge your own beliefs. It's tough, but it's important.
That's a lot to ask, especially in the world of online content creation where everything is so fast-paced and there's pressure to be entertaining, controversial, to keep people's attention.
True. It's not easy, but it's not impossible either. We've seen other creators evolve, become more mindful of the impact they have, use their platform for good.
Yeah, there are definitely some good examples out there.
Yeah.
So going back to Asmongold, he talked about wanting to cut back on streaming, make more videos, live a more normal life. Do you think that could actually help him break out of that echo chamber and see things from a different perspective?
It could, yeah. Less streaming would give him time to, step back from that world, engage with things outside of Twitch chat and algorithms.
Yeah.
And creating videos, that's a different kind of storytelling. It's slower, more deliberate. He'd have more time to research, think things through, and present a more nuanced view.
So it's less about reacting in the moment and more about taking the time to craft a message.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe stepping away from that constant pressure of live streaming will open up time for those real-world experiences he talked about, like traveling to the Middle East.
That was interesting, wasn't it? He talked about wanting to experience that region firsthand instead of just reading about it online. Do you think that could be a turning point for him?
Potentially, yeah. Imagine the impact of actually going to those places he's talking about, meeting people from different sides of the conflict, hearing their stories, seeing how complex it all is up close. That kind of experience can be really powerful, a real catalyst for personal growth.
It's like that saying, don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. It's easy to make judgments about a situation when you're viewing it from a distance through social media or news headlines. But when you're actually there, immersed in it, your perspective can change completely.
It can. And it's not just about travel, it's about actively seeking out different perspectives in all areas of life, Online, offline, it doesn't matter. Being curious, challenging your own assumptions, realizing that understanding something truly requires effort. Things aren't always black and white.
It's a powerful message.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, how do we, as viewers, as people who consume all this online content, how do we make sure that our own engagement with the world is informed and balanced? How do we break out of our own echo chambers?
That's the challenge for all of us, right? Especially in this digital age. It takes conscious effort, a willingness to be uncomfortable sometimes, to seek out information that challenges what we think we know.
So, diversifying our sources, having conversations with people who disagree with us, and always being open to learning new things.
Exactly. It's about remembering that the internet is a tool, a powerful one, but it's up to us to use it wisely and responsibly. And you know what? This is something we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at what Asmongold's planning for the future, whether real change is possible, and what we can all learn from this whole simulation about navigating online life. So stay tuned.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with this Asmongold situation. The controversy, the apologies, the whole idea of being responsible online. Now I think it's time to focus on what he's actually planning to do going forward. He mentioned some pretty big changes, remember, in that YouTube apology.
Yeah, cutting back on streaming, focusing more on making videos, even that whole thing about visiting the Middle East. It's ambitious, for sure.
It is, and it makes you wonder, is this real? Is he actually going to change, or is this just damage control? Saying what people want to hear to get out of the hot seat. How can we even tell if it's genuine, especially online?
It's a tough one, right? Anyone can make promises, but actions speak louder than words. We gotta look beyond what he's saying and see what he actually does, both online and offline.
Right. So let's get down to brass tacks. What would a less mean-spirited Asmongold actually look like when he's streaming? What kind of changes would actually show growth?
Could be subtle stuff at first, like maybe he pauses before reacting, chooses his words more carefully, actually tries to have real conversations with people even when he disagrees with them.
Okay, so more self-awareness, more empathy, less of those knee-jerk reactions.
Exactly. He could also shift his humor away from those edgier jokes that, punch down or rely on stereotypes.
So basically, a pretty big change from how he's built his career so far. I think he can actually pull it off.
It's a challenge, that's for sure. We all have these online personas, those versions of ourselves we present to the world, right? It takes work to change that, to be vulnerable, maybe even a little awkward sometimes as you try to figure things out.
It's like learning a new language, I guess. You're going to mess up. But with practice, it gets easier.
Exactly.
Now, he also mentioned cutting back on streaming and putting more energy into making videos. How does that fit into all this, personal growth and breaking out of the echo chamber?
Well, videos let you tell a different kind of story, a more thought-out, deliberate story. He'd have more control over his message, more time to research, reflect, present a more nuanced view.
Makes sense. So it's not just reacting in the heat of the moment, it's choosing what he wants to say and how he wants to say it.
Right.
And maybe that break from the constant pressure of live streaming, that breathing room, will give him the space to really process everything that's happened and figure out who he wants to be moving forward.
That's the hope, right? To find that balance between being authentically yourself and understanding the responsibility that comes with having a platform and an audience.
Speaking of balance, there's that whole thing about him wanting to travel to the Middle East to see things firsthand instead of just reading about them online.
Yeah, that really stuck with me too. It's one thing to read about the Israel-Palestine conflict online, but actually being there, experiencing the complexity, talking to people on all sides, that's a whole other level.
It's about humanizing the situation, isn't it? Suddenly, it's not just abstract concepts or political talking points. It's real people, real lives, real stories.
Exactly. That kind of exposure can really change you. It makes you question your assumptions, challenge your biases, and hopefully you come away with a deeper, more compassionate understanding of the world.
So, Asmongold's journey, if he actually follows through on all of this, could be a really interesting case study in how real-world experiences can shape online perspectives. But it also makes me think, how do we make sure our own online experiences are informed and balanced? How do we all break out of our own echo chambers?
That's the million-dollar question for everyone in this digital age, right? It takes conscious effort, a willingness to step outside our comfort zones, to actively look for information that challenges our own views.
So being more critical about what we read and watch online, having conversations with people we disagree with, always being open to learning.
Exactly. It all comes down to remembering that the internet is a tool, a powerful tool, but we have to use it wisely and responsibly.
Well said. I think that's a good place to wrap things up. This Asmongold situation is messy, no doubt, but there are definitely some valuable lessons in here for all of us.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for another one.